There we go. And it looks like we're live. All right. So right now, I don't think there is anybody online yet. So we're going to wait a little bit and see who shows up. Hopefully we get a few folks in here soon. But this is going to be the second in a series of streaming seminars by the Northern Virginia Motion Picture Co-op. Coming at you live from Fredericksburg, Virginia. I am Rob Kendzie, for anybody who doesn't know, and let's see. How are we doing? Yeah, I still think that it's going to be a few minutes before we get people in here. So this is basically going to be me talking to myself for a little bit. So, that'll be fun. But we'll give it a little bit of time. And hopefully we'll get some folks to come into the room shortly. I imagine it's going to take about 5 or 10 minutes. If there's anybody in chat, say something so that I know that you're there. But I don't think there is anybody at the moment. So it looks like we've got a couple of people watching right now. Or maybe not. Maybe we only have one person watching. I don't know. I'm looking at the analytics. But hopefully in the next 5 to 10 minutes, we'll get a few more people in. How's our stream health? The stream is healthy. Let's see. It says no data. YouTube is not receiving enough video to maintain smooth streaming. What? No, stream is healthy. That was at 6:31. 6:34. We're up and running. And now it's saying nobody there. I'm in Rob issues with logging in, it seems. So I have people who are trying to get into the stream who are telling me they can't get into the stream. So that is a problem. Yep, I see. Oh, hey, my friend Paul. Paul, how are you? I see Paul is in the stream now. So again, we're trying to get things moving here. Let's see. Got one person in here now. Try the stream again. Okay, I've got my friend Rick Miranda is trying to get into the stream right now. But apparently there's Rick. Okay. Oh, you're on the road. What are you people doing out? Do you know there's still a plague on? All right. Sounds good. All right. Thanks for stopping by, Paul. Really appreciate you come by to watch the stream. Yep, Rick, I can see you now. And of course, there is like a 30-second delay on anything that I do here before you guys see it there. So we got a couple of people in. I know that Nick Zumwalt's going to be dropping in a little bit later, and hopefully some other folks. But I think this is going to be kind of a rolling thing where people are going to be coming in and out. So as long as we're here, and as long as we've got a couple of people in chat, let me go ahead and I'll do the big reveal. Excuse me. Because I don't know if you can tell, but this is the camera on my laptop that you're looking at, and it is awful. So I have hooked up another camera. So hello, this is I'm actually using the camera on my phone for this setup. Use a thing called Droid Cam to use the camera on my phone because I don't have a good webcam yet. I don't know that we're going to be doing a lot of webcam streaming in the future. I'd like to. I think so. I think I'd like to do a little bit more streaming. We'll see how it goes. So let me check and see if anybody else dropped in. Not yet. There we go. All right. I hope everybody's doing okay out there. I know things are kind of rough right now with the quarantine, and I know some of the states are starting to lift restrictions right now. So as long as I'm starting this, and because whether or not there's a lot of people watching now, but people are going to be watching later on, I want to just go over a couple of things related to future productions for the co-op, and that is again. Unfortunately, we were supposed to be this week working on In Between, but all that got called to a halt when the world stopped back in March. So slowly things are going to start to come back online now, but I don't want to move forward with anything unless we're doing it in a safe manner where everybody is everybody's health is safeguarded. And obviously we're not a big organization. We don't have the means for testing people and things of that nature. So it may be some time, unfortunately, before we can get back into production on anything at the moment. It's really kind of a shame. I was really hoping that we could get 2 or 3 productions rolling over the summer here. We've already lost a lot of time, but knock wood, we're hopefully going to get at least one production released this year, which is a production that we shot last year, which is Are You Gonna Eat That?, which has been sitting in an editing for quite a while just because of various logistical issues. But it looks like those may finally be freeing up, and I know I have promised that before, but I'm confident that we're gonna be able to do something with that before too long. So hopefully before the summer is out, Are You Gonna Eat That is going to be released. I'm definitely hoping before before August, hopefully, definitely before the end of August. So I've got to talk to Brandon a little bit more about that. And also I really would like to start doing the live seminars again. Unfortunately, I don't know when we're going to be able to do that again. Again, social distancing rules remain in effect, even though things are starting to open up. So, and also, I think we're going to change a little bit of how we do things here in terms of the streaming seminars as well, because while it's all well and good, all you guys just listen to me talk at you for a couple of hours, I think that we're going to try and switch to a format using Zoom or some similar software, maybe Discord. We already have a Discord channel that nobody uses, but maybe I should be making a push to use the Discord channel more. That probably would be a good way to get people to get back in touch. Everybody's really wrapped up in their own stuff right now, which is why it's very hard to dedicate any time to doing the co-ops work and whatnot. But maybe the next seminar that we do, I definitely want it to be a little bit more interactive so that we'll be able to actually see and talk to people and see each other's faces. Because as cool as learning how to do streaming is, I definitely want to talk to you folks and get back in there. Let me take a look and see who else is here. Nice wall colors. Yeah, this is the media room. Thanks, Rick. Donating money for a temperature scanner. That'd be cool. That'd be very cool. I don't know how we would get a hold of one. I have no idea where we would get one from. But let's I'll definitely keep that in mind, because we have to figure something out, because eventually we do have to get back to work if the co-op's going to do any more projects. We do still have 3 projects pending. We've got In Between, we've got Empress of Earth, and we've got the Nexus. Are the 3 that are sort of in the development channel right now. And like I said, unfortunately, because things have kind of come to a halt, we're stalled. We're in turnaround, as they say. But hopefully we're going to get out of that sooner than later. All right. Let me just take another quick look at the chat. All right. And what's our line say? Well, right now it says it's only it looks like it's still only Paul and Rick on. I know that Nick's on his way in. but he's on the road right now as well. So hopefully he'll be joining us shortly. But we might as well get into it, get into the meat of it, of why we're here and what we came here for. Rick says, "Woohoo!" Like Zoom, yeah, Zoom would be cool. Zoom, everybody's using it. I saw something online the other day. So like Skype had a 16-year head start, and Zoom still beat him to the punch somehow. So I don't know. That's technology wars. So let's go ahead and let us get started talking a little bit about Legend of the Firebird. So I think what we'll start by doing is I will go ahead and show you a piece of footage. We'll start with that. Legend of the Firebird was or I should say is a project which is has been going on and off, mostly off, but sometimes on, for about 9 years now. I still haven't given up on it because a lot of work has been done on it. But what we're going to start is by showing you a trailer for a film that does not exist. So I'm going to go ahead. I'm just going to roll that now.
I will tell you a story. It is an old tale of the old times, when the world was still wild and beautiful and strange, and the forests were still dark and fearful. It begins with a prince who was also a pauper, and a princess who was stolen on her wedding day, and a vile, decrepit sorcerer who could not be killed, and who had terrible monsters at his beck and call. The prince could not defeat such darkness without the help of a very special creature. A spirit of fire who did not wish to be tamed. This is the legend of the Firebird.
Okay, and that was the trailer for Legend of the Firebird. So, what is this project? What is it about? How did it come about? And how did we get from concept to that completed little short trailer there? That's what we're going to be talking about. Basically, how we're going from a concept to a pitch to a pre-production and into production on a short film like this. So, we're going to take a form of production diary. I would really love to be getting back to doing more sort of like visual storytelling, analytics, and things like that. Unfortunately, it's really hard to do on these streaming seminars because the reference material that I'll be using is all, I'll be getting copyright strikes left, right, and center. So I guess we're looking at it from the point of view of co-op stuff. So we're going to be talking about Legend of the Firebird today, and probably we're going to do for the next one we may be doing To Whom It May Concern. But so. What's Legend of the Firebird? How did it come around? And what was the inspiration for this bit of madness? So, Sherman set the Wayback Machine back to about 2005, 2006. I had young kids, and I had one of my kids was very interested in the ballet, and They had been, talking about taking dance classes. I think they did take dance classes for a while, and they were looking at various, did they want to start like studying to be a ballerina, basically? And I think a lot of little girls especially, go through that kind of phase. The phase didn't wind up lasting very long, but we didn't actually get it too much into lessons and things like that, probably for the better. But one of I do actually have kind of a thing for ballet, particularly Russian ballet. So of course one of the things that we did while they were talking about this interest is we looked at different ballets on YouTube, and we had a couple on DVD. We had the Nutcracker on DVD, and a couple of other things. But I found on YouTube, and it is still on YouTube, you can find it on YouTube, this wonderful production, and it's called Legend of the Firebird, and this is something that the Bolshoi put on. And it's very, very interesting. I was very, very taken with this production. And again, you can watch the whole thing on YouTube. It's about 40 some minutes long. The thing about this is normally when you see a ballet that has been filmed, it's the ballet is being performed on a stage in a theater, and the camera is basically taking the place of the audience. There may be multiple cameras, but it's usually multiple cameras that are set out in the audience of a theater, shooting a stage, basically shooting the stage as if you were in the theater watching the ballet. This production was completely different from that. This production was shot in a soundstage. It was shot in a movie soundstage with no particular audience reference point. It was shot like a film. There were close-ups and cutaways and tracking shots, and it had been set up to basically be presented. In terms of like the sets and everything like that, it still had the feeling of like watching a ballet in a staged space. It wasn't shot outdoors. There was no location. It was all done in a soundstage. And they weren't trying to make it look like it wasn't in a soundstage. It was definitely, it had the look of, we're shooting this in a soundstage, but doing that instead of on a theater stage. And so when I was watching it, it was like watching a movie version of this ballet. And I said to myself, hey, that's a fantastic idea. This particular story, it's a fantastic story. It's got monsters, it's got wizards, it's got magic, daring do, swords and sorcery. It could be a really cool sort of like sword and sorcery film. If you wanted to shoot it as an adventure story, using the story of the ballet. And of course there's Igor Stravinsky's music, which is amazing. This particular ballet, I'm very, very enamored of the music for this ballet. So I had this idea. It sort of like stuck in my mind, and so what's the next step from there? Well, so this is where we start. We start with a concept. Let's take this story, this ballet story, and turn it into a sword and sorcery film. Sword and sorcery version of the Firebird. So our next step is to go to a treatment. And this is just a little image of of one of the original treatments for the story. Hang on, I'm just gonna get my notes going here. Whoops. All right. Excuse me. So what is a treatment for a film? A treatment is basically saying it gives a description of what the film is going to be like. It talks about like who the film is for. What's the concept behind the film? Why would anyone want to do this film? But why would someone want to watch this film? And it gives a general outline of what the important story beats are. So it's like an outline for a film. Talks about the characters, talks about what they're going to be doing, and gives a general outline, an overview of what the film's going to be. So, and hey, we don't really need to sit here and look at that, so I guess we can look at this again. I'm going to keep my notes up here. And while I'm talking, let me just go ahead and take a look at the analytics. Oh, hey, we've got more viewers in the stream now. That's great. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. We're talking again about Legend of the Firebird. And let me just make sure that I've got everything here. I beg your indulgence. I am my own crew, so it's a little. This is a new experience for me anyway. So a treatment. So this was basically, it was like a 3 or 4 page document that I wrote. It outlined who the characters were that were going to be involved, and of course, I didn't just start with the ballet. I did start with the ballet. So who are the characters of the ballet? The characters of the ballet, we got Prince Ivan, who's sort of this callow youth guy who's unsure of himself, and he stumbles into the garden of this evil sorcerer named Cachet, who is kind of like a traditional Russian kind of boogeyman type character, the deathless sorcerer Cachet. And he meets a princess who is being held captive by Cachet, and he also meets the Firebird, which is sort of a in the ballet it's a bird. It's not really specified what kind of bird the Firebird is, but the Firebird has a very mischievous personality and is very flighty and is very active. And Ivan and the Firebird have a kind of relationship. And of course, in the ballet, the Firebird is played by a woman, and Ivan and the Firebird conspire with one another to rescue the princess, who is one of many princesses being held captive by Cachet. And Cachet he's called Cachet the Deathless because he can't be killed, because he has hidden away his soul so that it can't be taken from him in death. He is so greedy that he won't give up his soul, so he has hidden his soul, basically imbued it into a needle, and the needle is inside of an egg, and the egg is inside of another creature that's at the bottom of in the original legend. There's a needle, and the needle's in an egg, and the egg, I think, is like a duck, and I think the duck is inside some other animal, and that animal's at the bottom of a well. It's very well hidden. So Ivan has to find the egg, and then once Ivan finds the egg, he cracks it open, he takes out the needle and breaks it, and that causes Cachet to die, which is something, it's kind of like it's a very Dungeons and Dragons kind of concept. There's a thing in Dungeons and Dragons called a lich, which is basically what Cachet is, with this bone needle being his phylactery, so to speak. For all the nerds out there, because I'm definitely that kind of a D&D nerd. So those are the characters that are depicted in the ballet. I wanted to also find out more about the legends that the ballet was based on. So I did a bit of research, reading some old Russian folk tales, and you find out that there's a lot more to it than just what's in the ballet. Ivan originally is looking for the Firebird because there's a king who's got an orchard full of golden apples, and the golden apples keep disappearing, and Ivan is one of several people who try and figure out what's happening to them. I think it turns out the Firebird is eating them, and then Ivan goes on an adventure to try and find the Firebird. He meets a wolf, and Ivan and the wolf have this big relationship where the wolf eats his horse, and then feels bad about it, I guess, and so teams up with Ivan, and the two of them, the wolf, in order to make up for eating Ivan's horse, he agrees to help Ivan, not trap the Firebird, but basically track down the Firebird, and then he agrees to help Ivan get into Cachet's garden and rescue the princess. And there's a couple of different variations on what this story is, so it's like all folktales. It's got a lot of different variations. So I took all of these different bits and pieces from the folktales, from the ballet, and I put together this treatment. There were several drafts of the treatment. The very first draft, again, it was very D&D. It was very sword and sorcery. There were a couple of extra characters put in. I gave Cachet an evil raven spirit to help him, and that didn't wind up staying in. Ivan. Originally Ivan had a cousin, Alexei, who was going to sort of be his foil. The two of them were going to go together through the adventure. Alexei survived all of the treatments, but didn't make it when we originally got to a script. Alexei got dropped out of the production, so that character went away. So there was a bit of an ebb and flow. But I spent about 2, 3 weeks, 4 weeks working on it, maybe more like 2 or 3 weeks. And I took a look at it and I said, hey, that's a really cool story. I would really like to make that. There's no way I can do that now. I shoved it in a drawer. And basically, I literally put it in the drawer of my desk. And that is where it stayed. So, it would have been a really fun thing to do. But there was just, no, there was no way. I took one look at it. I was like, who's going to help me make this? How am I going to do this? Well, 5 years pass. And that often happens with these kind of things. So 5 years pass. It's 2011, and I happened to have some money put away, and I wanted to take some of it and make a film because I hadn't done any film work in the last 5 or 6 years. It had been a while. I'd been focusing really on raising my kids and helping my family. But I felt the time was right. I had been wandering around Fredericksburg. There were a lot of places that I knew looked really good that I wanted to shoot in, and I wanted to sort of just get back on the horse and start up again. So I went digging through all of my old ideas, and I opened my drawer and I pulled out the treatment for the Firebird, and I was like, well, that's a thing. It still seems pretty far-fetched, still seems pretty pie in the sky, but let's see where it goes, was basically my idea there. So the very first thing then that I had to think about was, all right, first of all, would it be, let's assume pie in the sky, we want to make this and make it a feature film. The odds were very low, but I thought, you got to plan for success. Let's think about this. So I thought, well, first of all, can I even do that? Is there is the story in the public domain? What about the music? Is the music still under some kind of copyright? I know Stravinsky is dead, but is his estate still around? And do they own the ballet, the orchestration for the ballet? Because it was very important to me that if I was going to do this, that the music from the ballet would have to feature very heavily, because I was really into the music. I think it really sort of would make the project. And also, so when you're developing a story, when you're developing an idea, especially if it's going to be a commercial idea, there's 3 things that you need to get to a green light on any project. 1 is financing, 2 is distribution, and the third is, I basically can call it star power. If you have any one of those 3 things, it becomes easier to get the other 2. It's never a guarantee. And you can have all 3 and the project can still fall apart. So the only thing that I would have going for me if I was going to try and pursue this project would be Stravinsky, would be the star power, so to speak. And even that is that's kind of thin, but it was enough to sort of to start me down the road. So I immediately started looking around to see if Stravinsky's score was in the public domain. And here's a copy of his score right there. So the thing about the thing about the copyright on this is it's a whole story in and of itself. So I had to do quite a bit of research. Because this story was originally, the ballet was premiered in 1910, that makes the copyright status of it very interesting, because the ballet premiered in 1910, but Stravinsky lived until 1971. So that made the copyright kind of weird. And I wound up watching this amazing presentation by an academic scholar telling the story of copyright by talking about the Firebird. Because at the time that the ballet was released, the U.S. was not recognizing certain international copyrights, certainly not copyrights out of Russia at the time. So when Stravinsky originally orchestrated the ballet and originally premiered it in Russia, it was not copyrighted in the United States at the time. And after World War I believe, it was either right before World War I, it was sometime around just after the Russian Revolution, Stravinsky moved to Paris, I believe, and while he was in Paris, people were performing the Firebird because it became a very popular piece of music very quickly. It's really kind of a shame. It was one of Stravinsky's first big hits. It was basically like his first big hit, and he kind of got sort of like tied to that for the rest of his career, and he kind of hated that. He didn't want to be thought of as a one-hit wonder, but everybody loved the Firebird, and it was his first major work. He got to Paris, other people were performing it, He wanted to get the copyright back on it because I think at the time in France they didn't recognize the copyright from Russia. So what he did was he reorchestrated the Firebird, and at the time while he was living in Paris, and he re-released it as a new work basically, which I believe at the time still wasn't recognized in the United States. So when later on he did move to the States, much later, sometime between World War I and World War II, I believe. And when he moved to the States, he had to do it again. So basically, he's moving around the world, and he basically, everywhere he goes, he's got to and when I say reorchestrate, he changes a few things. Very small things here and there in the intro. He's not doing a lot of refining. He's basically doing kind of a remix, almost, of the Firebird. He's doing a remix so that he can copyright the new score, the new orchestration score that he's doing. But the problem is that all of the other scores are still out there in the world, and people are still using them. And the United States, especially after the Russian Revolution, still wasn't recognizing the copyright for the original orchestration. So people were still putting on the Firebird and still doing, presenting the ballet and playing the score and making money off of it that Stravinsky wasn't seeing. In fact, the Firebird's suite, which is basically a suite of the music from that original score, got used by Walt Disney in Fantasia, in their Fantasia film, which I believe is in the 30s. And I know that Disney did pay something to Stravinsky, but I think he did it just to sort of shut him up, because the understanding at the time was that Disney didn't need to pay Stravinsky to use that particular score. But he did it anyway, just sort of, I guess, so that he wouldn't look like a jerk, although Walt was never really that concerned about looking like a jerk historically, so I don't know, there probably was some legal wrangling there. But the long and short of it is that the ballet and the original score are in the public domain. There are some other orchestrations which might not be in the public domain, but the original one is, and that's the one everybody uses. Now, it's slightly different in the U.S. than in Canada, and this is something that's important if you're ever going to be developing a project which has to do with what you think is a public domain property. Let's go ahead and go back to the phone cam for this, because you don't need to sit there and looking at the score. If you are developing any kind of a public domain property, like there's plenty of wonderful public domain stuff out there. There's like things like, that's why you see Robin Hood movies and King Arthur movies come around every once in a while. Historical dramas about famous events and things like that. That kind of thing is in the public domain. Lovecraft is coming into the public domain now. I think most of his stuff is in the public domain at the moment. It's slightly different. The laws are slightly different, and this is why it's so confusing. They're different in the U.S. than they are in like Canada and Europe. And they are different in the U.S. depending on when the work was published. So Stravinsky's Firebird is before 1924, which means that it is it's before 1924, and it's also not in the United States. So it is in the public domain in the U.S. In Europe, and I believe in Canada, there is a life of the author plus 50 years, doesn't matter where it was published, and that has to do with, because copyright law changes every so often when governments pass new copyright laws. So under current copyright law outside of the United States, in certain places like Canada and I believe like the EU, it's life of the author plus 50 years. Stravinsky died in 1971, so that actually means that next year, in 2021, it'll be in the public domain outside of the United States as well. And just for reference, there's stuff that was published between 1924 and I believe 1975. Let me look at my notes again and see if I've got it here. Yeah, I think it's between 1924 and 1975 or 1985 or someplace like that, where copyright is the author's life plus 75 years, and the author's life plus 95 years, and then I think after 85 or somewhere around there, it's author's life plus 75 years. And of course, the laws have been changed numerous times, mostly by corporate copyright holders who want to keep hold of certain properties. I mean, that's why you're never going to... Mickey Mouse someday will be in the public domain, but... by the time Mickey Mouse is in the public domain, I don't know if anybody's going to care anymore. It's going to be a while before the Avengers are in the public domain and stuff like that. Let's go ahead and take a look at the stream one more time. and see how. All right, well, we still got a few people there. Hey, Darren, how you doing? Yes, Darren. Yeah, I would love to make this movie. Good to see you, Darren. Darren is actually one of the actors that you're going to see. He plays Cachet the Deathless in the trailer. It was great having you on the shoot, Darren. Thanks for stopping by. So all right, so that's enough about copyright. Copyright's a very dry subject, so we'll move on from that. But the point was that I did the research. It's in the public domain. We could use the music if we needed to. I mean, obviously, there's still performance copyrights that you have to respect. But if we were going to, do the film, and we would want to reorchestrate a score based on that original music, and that would be fine. The story, the libretto from the ballet, that's in the public domain, so that's not a problem there. Plus, the story's not just based on the ballet, but it's also based on the original legends, which I went back to when I was developing treatment, so we're fine there. So free and clear on copyright, that's fine. So then there was rewriting the treatment. I removed some of the D&D type elements. We did keep one new monster because in the ballet, Cachet is one of the things he does is he turns people to stone. There are other sort of would-be rescuers who have come to rescue these princesses that he has trapped in his castle. And in the ballet and in the folktales, he turns them to stone. The mechanism for this is not really described, but I decided to add a monster to the mix there. So there's a mythological creature which I know from Dungeons and Dragons. It's called the Cockatrice, and it's kind of like a cross. It doesn't look very intimidating, so we had to gussy it up a little bit. But it's a cross between a chicken and a snake. But we turned it into a much larger in the treatment. It's a much larger, more intimidating creature with poisonous spines, and it bites you when you turn to stone. So we made that a beast, one of Cachet's beasts, and one of his evil creatures. In the ballet, he's got these evil minions who do his bidding, and it's never really described adequately, like what these minions are. They goblins? Are they giants? It's not entirely clear in the ballet. They're just evil-looking guys who are dancers who back up Cachet in the ballet. So we had to come up with what these guys are. Who is Cachet? Why is he collecting princesses? What's going on here? So the story we came up with in a nutshell, the elevator pitch is that Ivan is getting married to a princess who we named Serena, and this is another thing in developing the story from the ballet. The princess is she's a quest item in the legends and in the story. She doesn't even have a name. So very not very kosher for a film you're making these days. And also, why you want her to be a character. You want her to have something to do in the film and someone to be. So her character had to be buffed up quite a bit and basically invented out of whole cloth because there was nothing in the legends because old Russian folktales, the princess is just the princess. So we named her Serena, although I don't think that was probably the best name. If we were going to go to the film, we probably should change that because Serena was based on Tsarina, which is Russian for princess. So she's a princess named Princess, which I'm not exactly sure why I decided to go that way, but we call her Sarah or something like that. The Firebird also, we had to look at exactly what we were going to do with this character because one of the things that we wanted to preserve was the fact that in the ballet, it's a bird being played by a woman, and there was something about that allowed there to be this sort of flirtatious relationship between the Firebird character and Ivan. So we wanted to sort of keep that, and how do you translate that into a movie? How do you get a woman to play the part of a bird? Well, the idea that we came up with in the treatment was that Stasia, we called her Stasia in the treatment, the Firebird is a spirit. It's not an actual bird, but it's a spirit. And sometimes the spirit takes the form of a girl, and sometimes the spirit takes the form of a bird. And the idea was that anytime the Firebird is in motion, it's a bird. Anytime it is going from place to place, anytime it is moving, it is a bird. But anytime as it comes to rest, it transforms into a beautiful girl. And so that was going to be the conceit that was going to make make the project work. The Firebird, I think we went through a couple of different names for the Firebird. I think Yurith was one of them because we were looking for Russian names that had to do with freedom and fire and rebirth and things like that. But eventually we've settled on Stasia. And so we've got Prince Ivan, we've got Stasia the Firebird, we've got Serena the Princess. So Ivan is in an arranged marriage with Serena, but it turns out that Serena's father, who is King Igor, named after Stravinsky, King Igor has made a foul bargain with Cachet in the past, and he promised Cachet to trap the Firebird for him. And in order to do that, Cachet gave him a tree that gives golden apples. So he has like this limitless wealth that is growing on trees. But the day when Cachet is like, you have to have it done by this date, there's a deadline on this, and Igor is trying desperately to get Serena married off before the deadline. So he basically realizes that he was wrong to do this whole thing. He's very repentant, and so he's marrying off Serena before Cachet comes to collect his collect the bill. And so the whole thing starts off at Serena and Ivan's wedding, and it's an arranged marriage, and Ivan's not sure and Serena's not sure, but they have to come together and sort of like start to figure out who they are and what kind of relationship they're going to have. Unfortunately, they don't get very far before the wedding can happen. Cachet crashes the party. He's very angry about not having the Firebird. He's very angry that Igor has fallen down on his duties. He kills Igor. He wrecks the party. He takes Serena, and he takes the dowry that Ivan's family was counting on in order to to make the marriage work, and he takes it all away to his hideaway, which is like in a sort of a shadow realm that you can't really get to by walking. But Ivan finds out about the Firebird, and Ivan goes to find the Firebird. We took the old wolf that is, there was an old gray wolf that befriends Ivan in the legends. So we turned that into an old hermit who is kind of like an irascible, angry old hermit living in the woods who has some history with Cachet and with the Firebird, and we called him Volkov, which basically means, the wolf son in Russian. I think it was originally Volkovich, and we shortened it to Volkov. So Ivan teams up with Volkov, and then they track down the Firebird. They go to Cachet's palace, and things transpire there. It's. I don't want to go into the whole story because we would be here all day, but this was all laid out in the treatment. So we had the treatment. We had the go-ahead in terms of copyright. So the next thing I wanted to do is, while I was polishing up the treatment, is I cut some concept art done. And I'm going to show you some of the concept art now, because I think that'll be more interesting than sitting here listening, looking at my ugly mug. So we found an artist online. His name is Josh Adesi. He was a great guy. He did a lot of wonderful work for us, and we went through a whole lot of different iterations on what these characters were going to look like. And the idea was that these drawings, these concept drawings, would help us sort of like visualize the characters going forward, and B, also we could use these to help get the idea across about what these characters were going to be like and what the look and feel of the film was going to be like. So this right now, what you're looking at right now, is the final concept we did for what the Firebird looks like in its bird form. This sort of like flaming bird that's got kind of like almost like peacock feathers trailing off of it. Has a little bit of the look of like a raptor or something like that, of some kind of a bird of prey. But it's got these crazy feathers coming off. And of course, whenever it flies, it is trailing fire and flame behind it. So then this was one of the concepts for Stasia. We did a couple of different concepts of her, of what her look would be. I wanted something to show off the fact that she is mischievous, because that is part of her character in the ballet. And so that became part of her character in the story, was that she was going to be a sort of like trickster type person. Let's see. And then, of course, there was... this was just a very crude representation of like what it was going to be like for when she transformed into the Firebird. This was... we didn't really wind up using this concept because we, at the time, for the short, certainly, we really didn't have the wherewithal to make it work. But this was just sort of like an initial idea of what the transformation sequence was going to be like. And of course, there was work done on Stas's costume. Now, normally you'd hire a costumer to do this kind of thing, but we weren't sure exactly what the project was going to be going forward. We weren't sure if it was going to to be a short or if it was going to be a feature or what it was going to be. And also, I was looking at these characters not in terms of like in some way they're kind of like comic book characters in a way, and that sort of like the outfit helps define who the character is and what the character is like. And so this was a final full body version of the character there. Then this is what we wound up going with as sort of like the basis for what the costume would be for when we went ahead. Rick says, like the tessellated streamers. Oh, cool. How are we doing that now? Yep. All right. So we still got a few people watching. Let's go ahead and move on. And so that was Stasia. Then the next thing we wanted to see was Ivan. Here's Ivan. Josh did a number of different takes on Ivan, but the idea was that he was going to be youthful. He was going to be kind of dashing, and we wanted to do something that would really show off his character, and so we did this drawing here, which is that's Ivan in a nutshell right there. That's kind of like, you could really see his character in that picture. He's off balance. He's kind of out of his element. He's not sure what's going on, and he is trying desperately to get something done. There was also, so here's some of the concept art that was done for Ivan, and also his sword. The kind of sword that we wanted to go with in the designs, the one on the right, it's a kind of a sword. It's a Russian saber called a shaksa or a shaksha or something like that. It's been a while since I did the work on that. And then we had this was the art for Serena, the princess. I loved this dress. I thought that this was a beautiful sort of like interpretation of what an old medieval Russian wedding dress would look like. Just a lot of beautiful embroidery, a lot of cool color. And then we had, let's see here, we had Cachet. So here's our evil sorcerer. So this was one of the looks for Cachet. So in talking about Cachet and about who he was and what his deal would be in the story, I came up with the idea that one of the reasons that he wants to keep the princesses, he takes the dowry, he even takes one of the towers from the castle to add to his house. He wants to take the Firebird as well, and the idea of this greed that was almost like a compulsion with him, like a greedy compulsion that would make him hoard things. So I'd been watching on television, like on the Discovery Channel and stuff like that. They did shows about hoarder houses, people who have been like collecting newspapers and stuff like that for 20 or 30 years in their houses. He is absolutely a wreck with the ruin of decades of collecting. And you can't even move in the place. And so I had the idea that was going to be what Cachet's palace was going to be like. His palace was literally going to be full of the trash and treasure of centuries that he had collected, and his captives would basically would be living in this. It would be like sort of like crawling through it like house cats in a hoarder's house. And so that was reflected in his costume. And I'm going to zoom in a little bit on the costume, because the idea was that it was going to be layered. That Cachet would like have he'd be wearing something, and it would like be slowly falling apart because he wouldn't take care of it, and then he would just throw something else on as clothes rotted on his body. He would just throw something else on, and then he would have these layers of clothing on that would be rotted in various states of decay, depending on when he had put it on. And then his scepter became an important element in the story, so there were several designs of his scepter there. I think we wound up going with number 2 for the concept art. Let's see, and then there was Cachet's minions. His minions, here we go. So these are some really cool concept pieces that Josh did for the minions. And the idea was that they would be basically like trash golems, essentially. The idea was that maybe Cachet at one point, he did have men-at-arms. He did have soldiers who worked for him. But they eventually, died and rotted away in their suits of armor And as things broke, as limbs broke, and as the armor broke, Cachet's magic would just sort of like patch it back together with whatever happened to be around. So there would be these shambling trash knights, basically, who would be walking around. Let's see, we got two more of them here. There we go. There's just two more. So we had four total Minion costumes that we had sort of like designed. So this to give people an idea of like what Cachet's minions were going to be like. And because they weren't really alive, you wouldn't be able to stop them with a sword or anything like that. Then, of course, there was the Cockatrice, which was his creature that turns people to stone. And where is that? Here's that. So we wanted to make it a little bit more like a dragon. So that would be about the size of a pony, probably, with these awful spines all over it and this evil-looking rooster head on it. We've got a copy of the where is it? Copy of the rooster head. There it is. Bang, like that, with those sort of like glowing, evil, beady eyes and that horrible hooked beak. I'm really sad we weren't able to realize this for the final when we did the trailer, when we did the short. We had I talked with a puppeteer about like how you would rig the thing, and this would give you a little bit of idea about that. If you have a guy crouching inside of it with a counterweight for the tail. That sort of like puppet design was inspired a little bit by the Mystics and the Skeksis from the Dark Crystal, from Jim Henson's movie there, in terms of like how the anatomy would be managed by a puppeteer inside the beast. And of course, you could also do it with CG as well. But one of the ideas that I had for this film going forward was that it was going to have kind of had that Jim Henson feel to it, something in the realm of the Dark Crystal or of Labyrinth. Where we do as much in camera as possible and would do as much practically with creature effects as we could, because that stuff always looks really good inside the camera. All right, how are we doing on the stream here? Okay, so I see some people have come and gone. I guess I'm nattering on a little bit about the story and about what kind of stuff we would be doing here. But so we started putting the production together. The idea was that once we had the concept art and we had the treatment, then the next step would be a script and something to use to sell the script. Now, at the time, I was very interested in this not being, 100% on my docket, because I had a lot of things going on at the time. I was publishing a webcomic called Dire Destiny at the time. I was working hard on a number of publishing projects. I didn't think that I would have time to produce either a short or some kind of promo for the film and write a script at the same time. So there was a lot of waffling back and forth on whether it was going to be a feature film, whether it was going to be a short film, what exactly we were going to do with this now that the ball had started rolling. And I started contacting some people I knew who were writers to see if I could contract somebody to write the script. Like I said, I had a little bit of money put aside for this project. So the first person I hooked up with was this guy named Chris Newhard. And he is a director of photography out of Philadelphia. There he is there working with the camera on the promo. Great guy, really super professional guy, absolutely fantastic DP. He's gone on to do some wonderful things. And so Chris and I got started talking about this project, and because I was trying to get an idea. I wanted to get somebody who was doing a lot of regional work on smaller budget productions to find out exactly, what I had been out of Hollywood for like 10 years at that point. Because, again, I'd been, working on raising my family. So it'd been 10 years I'd been out of Hollywood. And I had wanted to sort of like get some local people in on this production to help out with, who were more keyed into things that were going on in sort of like the Eastern Seaboard region. Chris, I saw his reel on YouTube. I went hunting through a bunch of DP reels and directors reels on YouTube, and I found Chris's. It looked really, really good. He had done a lot of music video work. Chris and I started going back and forth via email, and I think we had a couple of phone call conversations as well. And he was really hot for the project. He thought it was a really fun project as well. We started talking about the possibility of like a super low budget feature version of the project, but after a while, Eventually we settled that we couldn't really do it justice with the amount of money that we had. And plus I had some personal things come up where that meant that there wasn't going to be as much money as we thought there was going to be, basically. So the idea then became, all right, we're going to shoot a promotional sort of proof of concept video. And at the same time, we're going to be working on a script. And so I contacted a guy I knew who was a writer, who also, he had more of an audience than I did, but he was a semi-popular webcomic writer online. I'm not going to name him for reasons that will become obvious shortly. But I knew him. I had seen him around at conventions that I had been hawking comics at and things like that. He and I got together. We had a conversation about the project. He seemed like he was all in on it. He seemed like he was raring to go on it. I thought it was going to be really good. He wasn't a big name by any stretch of the imagination, but he had a name in terms of like people knowing who he was. So we drew up a contract. I paid him a small advance for him to get to work on it. And this was the first time that he'd be writing a screenplay. So, I was basically paying him to learn how to write a screenplay. And we got started on this. And while we got into that, Chris Newhart and I started putting together what the production was going to be. And then we started sort of like putting together the elements for it. So I'm going to show you, this is the cover for the current screenplay, and you can see that's my name on the screenplay. Well, there's a reason for that. So here's our first major hurdle while we were getting this whole project done. So while I and Chris were putting together the promo video, which was going to be the proof of concept, I sent this guy off to start writing the screenplay. Well, it took about 2.5 to 3 months, and we're like well into pre-production on this. This was in fall of 2011, and we're well into pre-production on this thing. It's full steam ahead, but the writer he's not really producing anything, and I am talking to him. We're going back and forth via email. I'm calling him on the phone. And saying, I know that these things take time, but in the contract we had, there were certain milestones that were put out there, and he'd had like 2.5, 3 months to produce like just an initial draft, and that was what the deal was going to be in the contract. I wasn't expecting a polished, finished script. The idea was that he was going to produce basically a first draft that I was going to go back and I was going to refine, either I or another writer, or else I would bring him back around for a second round, whether another contract to refine the draft. But the idea was that just to get some kind of a first draft of the script done, so there would be something for us to work with once we had the promo done. Unfortunately, after 2.5, 3 months of going back and forth with him, he basically walked off the project. He abrogated his contract. He didn't pay back the whole advance either. It was really a lot of bad blood there. And I was really, really pissed off about that because, again, we were like in the middle of production on this other short that we were going to do. So I went out there, and I had some other friends who had been doing similar things, and I started looking around for recommendations. I need another writer. I need somebody who's got a bit of a track record. He doesn't have to have a name, but it's got to be somebody who can produce work on a timetable. And a friend of mine recommended somebody who he came very highly recommended, actually, and he started writing the project. We did a new contract. Did not pay this guy in advance, but we did a new contract with him, and he started work. And he produced more than the first guy, but not by much. And by the time that it was obvious that the second writer was not going to produce the script, by that time we were already shooting. Basically, we were already shooting the promo. So it was too late to pull back on the project. But we did not have a script that we were going to have for after the promo was done being shot. I was very, very upset about that, obviously. But I basically resolved that, okay, I guess we're just going to have to finish the promo first, and then I'm going to have to go and I'm going to have to write the script afterwards. I did do a draft the summer following after we shot the promo. It was very, very rough. It took me 2 to 3 years to come up with a final draft that I really liked. The first draft took about 4 or 5 months, and then I had to put it aside to work on some other things. And then I came back to it a few months later, and it got rewritten and refined. Some characters got dropped out. Some characters got expanded. Things got moved around. Basically, tinkering with it for quite a long time. And in fact, you can see, I think somewhere on here, the copyright on this particular version is from 2 years ago. So I was still tinkering with the script 2 years ago. But so that was the story with the script. So that's one of the reasons why this didn't move forward back in 2012. Because I did have some people who were interested, some people who had some money or who were doing larger productions in the area. So there was some interest. Unfortunately, by the time the screenplay was done, that interest had evaporated. So in addition, but I didn't really have time to think about it at a time. So in addition to dealing with that, we were still moving full steam ahead on pre-production on the short. So we had to think about visual effects, because obviously we wanted to see the Firebird in the promo. So I again went to the internet looking for people who were doing VFX work, sort of like on a freelance basis. I found a guy named Bernardo Irasi, who I believe is Italian, and he was living in Poland at the time. And he was a 3D animation artist, so I got in touch with him. He was a very personable guy. He did a heck of a lot of work for us for not a whole lot of money. And this is, so we started sort of like working on a model of the Firebird that was going to be a digital model based on the concept art that Josh had done. This was one of the initial sort of like renderings that Bernardo had done. And then that got refined and refined and refined over many iterations. And eventually we came to something more like this. And then obviously this was going to be something that was going to be, animated with fire coming off of it. We did a couple of different visual effects tests. Here's one of the early visual effects tests. We had a really, really hard time getting the fire to look correct. It was, one of these things. Here's a slightly different animation where the fire is slightly different, and sort of like the feathers are slightly different. We went through a lot of different iterations on this, but Bernardo was a really cool guy about getting the rendering done. We started very early on the project with him, so he had plenty of time to get the VFX tests and everything done. That was, that helped a lot in terms of getting a very professional look on the film. So what went right with the shoot and what went wrong with the shoot? Let's see, where are we in my notes here? Let me take a look at this. So we put together the rest of the crew. We had, the next major problem was makeup. We found a woman named Kim Reyes. And Kim was amazing. Kim was somebody I knew that we were going to have to do like a lot of body art for Stasis' character. So I went looking for somebody who specialized in body painting and body art. And we found Kim Reyes, who works out in the Northern Virginia, D.C. area. Really, really wonderful makeup artist. I knew that we had numerous characters that we had to work with as far as makeup is concerned. Kim was very professional and had a really good quote on a price for us. And she didn't just do the makeup herself. She put together a makeup department, so it was her and a couple of assistants, so that we could make sure that we got all of the makeup done in good time, and so that we wouldn't be wasting a lot of time on set with people waiting for makeup and things like that. And then for the minions, because we wanted to have a couple of these armored minions there, went to my friend Chris Bright, who some of you may know worked on To Whom It May Concern with us. Really cool guy, does a lot of wonderful work with props and with physical effects and things like that. Chris knew guys in the Society for Creative Anachronism, the SCA, guys who basically make their own armor and go out on the weekends and beat each other, with sword-like objects while wearing armor. And he got some of those guys involved. We borrowed some chainmail and some helmets and things like that, which were to put together for a sort of like a crude representation of what the armored minions were going to look like, and we would use that in the short. So, and Chris did a fantastic job there as well. The casting process was pretty effortless. We put together a really cool cast for the promo. These were all people we found through Backstage.com. It's a great resource if you're casting a short film, no matter where you are. As long as you're near a major metropolitan area, you're gonna find you're gonna find good people. Especially because we weren't paying a lot for this, but we were paying. It's true that you get what you pay for a lot of the time with actors. It's wonderful. We have such a great theater community here in Fredericksburg. To draw on local people in community theater and whatnot. I'm very, very thankful for groups like Stage Door and Fredericksburg Theater Ensemble, who are doing great community theater here in town and are nurturing a really, really good community of actors here. So we actually, since the Firebird was done, we've been able to source a lot of people just in the Fredericksburg Stafford area. Darren Markhart was our cachet. I think he's still in the audience of the stream somewhere. I hope you're there, Darren. I hope you're enjoying the stream. I know this is a bit of it may be a bit dry. I'm trying to spice it up a little bit here. But we had Darren for Cachet. We had a wonderful guy named Jared Calhoun to play Ivan. He definitely had that sort of look of a young prince to him. Absolutely beautiful young woman named Elise Dufour to play Stasia the Firebird spirit. And Rachel Burkhart, another sort of mainstay actor of I think of the DC theater scene. I know she's done a number of productions. She knew Darren, I think, and that was one of the. I don't think that was how she came on, but I think they knew each other before they worked on this together because she had done a lot of theater in DC as well, and she was playing Serena. We found an amazing guy named David Birkenbilt to play Volkov, and he's the old man who's telling the story at the beginning. He had this wonderful, deep, gravelly voice. That was the first time I tried to do a... because he couldn't make it to the original audition. That was the first time I tried to do an audition via Skype, which turned out to be a disaster in 2011 because just the quality wasn't there. So I wound up having him record some things and send them to me online. But he absolutely was perfect for Volkov. He had a great voice for it. Then our minions were a couple of guys from the SCA that Chris Bright knew, a guy named Alan Miller and a guy named Ford Torney, I think. Actually, I don't think Ford was in the SCA. I think Ford came from Mary Washington Theater department over at the university. So we got our casting set. The casting happened... we needed a place to do auditions that was closer to DC. We couldn't do them here in Fredericksburg. I needed to find a place. There was this place that billed itself as a theater supply company and a costume supply house in the sort of the not really the suburbs, but not really downtown either of DC. It was in Alexandria somewhere. And I went up there, and it was mostly Halloween novelty stuff, honestly, in their selection. And it was in the weirdest place in this strange building. It looked like a supervillain's hiding out. It was it wasn't quite at the level of an abandoned warehouse, but it was not that far from it. But the guy who ran it was a super nice guy, and he had a rehearsal space, which was just this weird dingy room and that was off of the office area. But I worked out a deal with him, and he let us do the casting there. Chris Bright was with me, and we videotaped all of the actors and actresses who came in to try out for the various roles. It was a bit of a weird casting process because none of the roles were really speaking roles. Although we are going to be seeing a little bit of I've got a little bit of hidden footage about that nobody's ever seen before, stuff that we shot on the day that had some bits of dialogue, which we're going to be seeing a little bit later on in the program. So we got the casting set up, and you're going to be seeing a bunch of these people when we look at the production stills, which is coming up next. But there was one department where things went terribly wrong. We had a costumer who was a seamstress who had done work like making ballroom dancing outfits and things like that. She will remain nameless here as well for reasons that will become apparent shortly. There were, I believe, 5 costumes that she had to do. She had to do Ivan, Serena, Stasia, Volkov, and Cachet. 5 costumes. She had, I believe, 6 months to do this. Maybe not. Was it 6 months? It was at least 6 weeks. It was more than 6 weeks. I think it was 4 months. It was between 4 and 6 months. So she basically had about a month per costume to get these costumes done. She went out. She bought a ton of materials, which we paid for, and there was some good progress at first, but then she kept falling behind, and we had scheduled fittings and makeup tests for our actors so that we would have an idea of what the makeup was going to look like and what the costumes were going to look like, so there would be time to make adjustments before we got to the shooting day. And so that was arranged with great difficulty over the course of a couple of weeks at I think it was George Mason University. We went to their theater department because it was closer to DC, and we rented one of their dressing rooms in one of their theaters when they weren't using it on a Sunday or something like that. So we were in there doing the makeup tests and doing the costume fittings. I say we were doing the costume fittings because the costumer only had a couple of costumes done. Out of the 5 that were supposed to be finished, she had like 1.5 costumes done. And in fact, when Darren was there getting his makeup test done for Cachet, and you're going to see that transformation in a minute, when Darren was getting that done, he didn't have a costume. There was just a bunch of material, some of which had been cut into shape and some of which hadn't. And we had to build the costume on Darren standing there at the fitting. I eventually had to hire a second seamstress to do basically some emergency work to finish a couple of the costumes that the main costumer didn't have done in time. She kept focusing on the skirt for the Stasia character, and we knew this going in. When you look at the film, you don't see the skirt. You only see the top. And I kept telling the customer over and over again, please stop working on that skirt that you're taking weeks to do, because it's much more important to get the wedding dress done for the princess. And the princess dress, when we got around to shooting, there was no princess dress. So that's another story. Yeah, what went wrong? A lot of things went wrong. First of all, it rained constantly in the weeks leading up to the shoot. It was supposed to be clear. I had looked at the Farmer's Almanac for that weekend. It was a Memorial Day weekend we were shooting. I think it was that Friday and Saturday and a little bit on Sunday. That Memorial Day weekend we were shooting. I had looked at the Farmer's Almanac for like the preceding 10 years, and it had been sunny every day. It rained every day for like almost 2 weeks leading up to the shoot. So I was constantly on the call. I was issuing revised call sheets saying, if it rains, we're going to have to reschedule. I'll be in touch with you. But getting that many people scheduled in one place is really, really difficult. I mean, we had a crew of about 15 or 20 people and a half a dozen actors, and all this stuff lined up. It was going to be almost impossible to postpone. When we showed up on the first day of shooting, it was just drizzling a little bit. And thank goodness it cleared up. We were able to sort of like start the process of getting things set up, and thankfully, within a couple of hours, the sun finally came out, and we had great shooting for the weekend. So the rain was a stressor, but it turned out not to be a terrible thing. But the horrible thing that happened was that the costumer showed up and missing one of the costumes. There was no princess costume. I had sort of, I want to say I had been expecting that. I've been dreading it, would be one way to put it. But I had learned a lesson on Subtle Poisons, which is the film we talked about in the last seminar, where you definitely always want to make sure that you have a blank check with you. If you're a producer on the set of a film, you want to have some blank checks, because there's going to be something missing, there's going to be something wrong, where you're going to need to grab a PA, give them a blank check, and say, go get the thing. So we were really, really desperate, so I grabbed, we had a wonderful PA there, named Barbie, I believe was her name, and Barbie was she was fantastic, and I basically took Rachel Burkhart, the actress playing Serena, and I said, okay, Barbie, Serena, here's a blank check, go find a wedding dress that we can use for the princess dress, which turned out to be really hard, because we needed something that was kind of like a Princess Diana dress with like the poofy sleeves and and like everything at that time, and I'm pretty sure even today is almost all wedding dresses. Most of them are sleeveless, and just like a completely different kind of cut. I think they went to 4 different bridal shops while we were shooting. Like the stuff with Serena was supposed to be shot first thing in the morning, and we wound up sending just Rachel out to find a wedding dress. It took I think 3 or 4 hours to go find a wedding dress so they could come back that afternoon and shoot Rachel's scenes on that day, because we only had her for the one day. We didn't have her for both days. We only had her for the one day. And the costumer had some ribbon and some costume jewelry that she sewed into the dress around the cuffs and around the bodice, so that it wouldn't look just like some standard wedding dress. So we did have a little bit of a look there going on. But I was very, very upset about that. Ivan has a sword on the production, and in the interest of safety, I was making sure that I was the one who was holding onto the sword whenever it wasn't being used, so that nobody was going to pick it up and swing it around, because it was an actual sword. It was a real sharp sword. We had a couple of foam swords there for Jared to use to practice his moves and things, in terms of like working out choreography and what to do with the sword. But I was holding on the sword. I remember Chris Newhart saying to me he thought I was going to hit somebody with it myself. Thought I was going to go stab the costumer. I was so pissed off about that. So that was the second thing that went wrong. The third thing that went wrong, we had a smoke machine that did not work. It was supposed to produce. We didn't need like a huge amount of fog or anything like that, but we did want to like put a little bit of smoke in the air during the scenes where the minions were, and sort of like to add some some shafts of light during the production. Smoke machine didn't work. And we had generators for the lights, and I had rented 2 generators, one for the base camp, so that the people doing the makeup would have stuff to power their airbrushes and things like that, and one to run the lights down at the shooting site. We didn't use a lot of lights, but we did need a couple of lights now and then. The generators all broke down. The generators were they were standard generators. I rented them from a hardware store, and they were the kind of thing that you use for like emergency power or construction site power. And they were supposed to be pretty robust things. They all broke down. The one that was running the lights broke down, so I had to have somebody run to the hardware store, swap it out for another one. That worked for a little while, and then that one broke down. The one powering the makeup station broke down. It was just headaches galore with the generators. My wife was doing production stills for us that we were going to need for the promotional material, and unfortunately she got really sick that weekend, so she only did a little bit of the production stills, and then she had to bow out. The second day of shooting, when we were working on the choreography for Ivan fighting the minions, my son at home pulled a bookcase down on himself, and he had to go to the hospital, to the emergency room, to get some stitches. So that took me away from the production. So many things went wrong. Eventually we pulled it off. So let's look at let's go ahead and look at some of the production stills, so that you can see some of the madness that was going on. So of course, first I did storyboard this heavily, because it was basically we were only going to get one shot at it, and I needed to make sure that we had that we knew exactly what we were doing. Here's Jared getting fitted for his costume on the day. And Jared, one of the things we did, we had a horse, which was wonderful. The costumer did manage to do a horse blanket for Ivan's horse. Now, I knew that I wasn't going to put Jared on the horse. I wasn't going to have him ride the horse, because that is just asking for trouble. Anytime you bring animals onto a set, there's danger, and it's dicey. So there was no way I was going to put an actor on a horse for this. But the idea of him leading the horse sort of stuck in my mind as something that'd be really cool to have, because we knew some people who had horses. They were very gracious about letting us, use their horse for the day, bring the horse out to the park. We shot this at Loriella Park in Fredericksburg, in Spotsylvania, and the Parks and Recreation Department was super, super accommodating about letting us bring the horse in. This is Chris Bright here working on Alan, I believe. That's one of our armored minions. And you can see when you look at it up close, it's a bunch of, I mean, it's like foam and moss and ragged cloth and some rusty chainmail. Chris had a bucket full of chainmail that he had bought that he was like put in salt water just so it would rust over the course of a couple of weeks. Oh, and here's a picture of, this is Kim Reyes, our makeup artist. She did a fantastic job. She really saved our bacon. She picked up a lot of slack that the costumer dropped in terms of, she made a crown and a staff, a crown for Cachet and a staff for Volkov that looked really good in the production stills. This is Chris with Ford Torney, who was our other minion. They had to be basically, put into these costumes, and they couldn't get out of them once they were in them. They did a lot of hard work. I think they worked up a hell of a sweat walking around in these things. Let's see what else we got. This is one of the other makeup artists working on Rachel Burkhart. And what was, I think that this was Dana Hurd Spence. I think that's Dana Spence, who was the other assistant makeup artist and she did basically the glamour makeup while Kim was working on like the effects makeup for Cachet. And let's see what else we got here. And this is here's the infamous wedding dress. And you can see this is the costumer attaching the some decor to the bodice so that it wouldn't look, just like a normal wedding dress. It would have a little bit of color in it. Unfortunately, there was no point in, like, I still have all of the costumes. I still have all of the material for the dress that was supposed to happen because all the material was bought. And in fact, most of it was cut too to fit the actress's measurements, but it was never sewn together. It was never put together. The original dress. So I didn't know what to do with the wedding dress after. There was no point in keeping it because it wasn't tailored to fit anybody. I didn't have any rights to use the design in any other productions or anything like that. I mean, I probably could have gotten away with it, put it in a costume box, but honestly, I was so fed up with it, I did not want to see this wedding dress again. I wound up giving it to Rachel afterwards so that she could take it. She said she was going to go and, mess it up and use it in a zombie walk. So this is a really cool series of photos. Now, this is Darren's transition into becoming Cachet. So it started with these really weird looking contacts that Kim had for him. And so after the contacts were in, then there was this black eye makeup that went on, and she paled him up a little bit, and she started working on the blending that was going to go around his hair. There was a prosthetic piece for the nose and the eyebrows. As you can see, Darren did not have to do like a full face mask kind of thing. So these applications, like, he didn't need to do like a life mask or anything, which was good because I don't think we could have afforded that. But here he is with more of the makeup on now. You can see the contouring happen there in the face. And then, of course, we start adding in that sort of like stringy, awful beard that he has. And then moving on to sort of like the rest of the hair, and then ultimately there is Cachet with his costume. His costume was supposed to be a lot dirtier. That was another function of the fact that the costumer was behind schedule and everything. That his costume was basically supposed to be full of mud and crap and look really, really dirty. But we couldn't get it dirty enough on the day. There wasn't time. That crown that he's wearing, Kim Reyes did that crown. I think she just did it out of Sculpey. Looked really, really good on set. There were fake fingernails to give him these clawed hands. Unfortunately, the fingernails mostly came off. By the end of the day, I think he only had like 4 of them left. Let's see. Oh, and there's Elise in her Firebird costume. She's got the top on there, and she's starting to get her makeup done. She obviously had a big makeup job that had to be done on her face as well in order to make it look correct. And one of the things I wish we had more time or more money for at the time, and if we were ever going to redo this, we would want to look at it, was getting more texture on her face. I think like using maybe some small jewels or things like that to really bring it out instead of just having the makeup. This was later in the evening on the first day because we shot a short dialogue scene with Volkov and Ivan around a campfire that night. And you're going to be seeing that scene a little bit later on today. We shot 3 dialogue scenes, one between Volkov and Ivan, one between... oh my goodness. Sorry about that. Hang on, guys. That is no good. There we go. Oh no, the stream has all gone wrong. My goodness. All right. There we go. Sorry about that. That's terrible. I should have shut that alarm off. Didn't mean to do that. Sorry about that, guys. Very unprofessional, but it's a learning process still for all of us. So we shot one with Ivan and Volkov. We shot one with Stasia and Ivan. We shot one with Serena and Cachet. Unfortunately, you're not going to see, I apologize to Darren, you're not going to see the one with Cachet today because the audio just turned out awful on it. It was unusable. But let's see, what else have we got here? So here's... So the fight choreography. The fight choreography was worked out basically. The guy Alan, who was one of the minions, he had, like I said, he had done a lot of work with the SCA, so he basically took over. He and Chris worked out the fight choreography between them. I had some very complex shots lined up for this section, which I knew on the this was on the second day, and by the end of the first day of shooting, I knew it wasn't going to work. So I told them to go basically put their heads together, and they came up with something really nice that I think really worked well in the concept of the short. Here's David Birkenbilt as Volkov, looking resplendent in his animal skins and his wild man look to him. And here's another great shot of Elise standing in a tree. Now, she wasn't very, very high up, but there had been an enormous storm like the month before, and there were tons of enormous fallen trees around the park where we were shooting. So we put her up on top of one of those for the dialogue scene that she was doing with Jared. So that was a lot of fun. And that was the production. We, despite all of the problems, we did eventually make it happen. And at the end of it, we had a really nice presentation package put together. We had a really nice piece of promotional footage that we put together. And everybody had, I think everybody had a pretty good time on the set, despite the setbacks. And in the end, I think we worked out something really, really good. And ultimately, unfortunately, by the time it was all in place, by the time it had all been done, the people who I was presenting it to had sort of lost interest and moved on from it. So that is unfortunately why it is a trailer without a film for the moment. But I do have a couple of little pieces of footage. So this is your reward for sitting through the hour and a half to get to this point. We have 2 very, very short scenes, and these were just sort of like example scenes. Again, this was all like part of the proof of concept. So the dialogue for these, again, there was no script. So the dialogue that's in these scenes is extremely rough and not very good. The script itself has turned out to be much, much better after 3 or 4 years of work than I had even expected it to be. But this dialogue was all sort of like, it was meant to be placeholder dialogue, which is one of the reasons why we never really used it for anything. But you get to see it today. So let's see. Let's go ahead. This is going to be Ivan and Volkov together talking about whether or not Volkov is going to help find the Firebird.
Leave the fire alone!
I'm trying.
Leave it be!
Are you really so callous? Or is it cowardice? People are dead. Without your help, things are only going to get worse.
You people, you never listen.
I'll listen.
You'll listen?
I'm asking you to help me make things right. Tell me about the Firebird.
Why should I tell you? I'll have to show you.
find the hidden and unreachable vault of Cachet the Deathless. Perhaps to rob him?
To rescue Serena.
It doesn't make a difference to Cachet. It's the same.
Show me the way.
Come up here and I may.
We mere mortals can't fly like you.
It's not a place you can walk to, little prince. You hardly seem to want it anyways. Perhaps you'd have a better chance of being captured by him.
Will that work?
It depends. Are you of great value? Are you a rarity here on Earth?
Well, I mean...
No. Princes come cheap, I know.
You're toying with me.
That's possible. Now, catch me.
All right, so there was that scene. And I realized just a moment ago that we lost audio very briefly between those two clips. Sorry again. Still learning how to stream, obviously. That first scene, again, that was Jared and David Birkenbilt playing Ivan and Volkov. Again, the audio turned out pretty good on that. It was all the none of that was looped or anything like that. In fact, I think you could hear a little bit of me giving some direction to David in between one of those cuts there. And the dialogue in both of these scenes, again, it was never meant to be. It was only a placeholder. This was very much a practice run to see if we could get something that would look good enough for the kind of money that we wanted to shoot this for. And I think we succeeded in that. And again, all props to Chris Newhart for making it all look really, really beautiful. The other scene you saw there was Stasia and Ivan, and we had Elise up on a branch so that she could jump down. And we had one of the crew there was there to catch her. She was, thank you, Elise. You were very game that day. I don't know. I was an idiot for even asking you to stand up on that thing. It was crazy, stupid. I mean, she was only like 4 feet off the ground, but still, it probably could have been done at a lower elevation. And again, the dialogue wasn't great, but this was all sort of placeholder because we did not have the script ready at the time. And again, unfortunately, even after we got all this together, the project still has not happened. So what is going to happen with Legend of the Firebird from here on out? That's the question that I've been asking myself for the last couple of years, especially. Ever since we put it up on the Co-op's YouTube channel, where you can go and you can watch the original trailer anytime you like. I'm very proud of the work that I did with that. It still looks gorgeous after all this time. And I am interested in pushing forward with the project. So I've thought over the last couple of years, and again, it would take money in order to do this, but I thought that the next step would be to do an animatic of the film. It's very unlikely that we could get money to just go ahead and make the film, right out of hand. But I would really like to do an animatic of the film where we storyboard it out and take those storyboards and get a dialogue track with some actors and lay in some sound effects and some music on top of that. So in effect, a way to make the film before we make the film. And to do it in a way where you get an idea of the visuals. And then we could use the animatic as something that we could bring to some new investors to try and sell the project. Or maybe take it to a festival or take it to a film market and see if we can get a distribution company to say, okay, once it's made, we'll have a distribution deal for this film. Because we've already sort of like seen what it's going to look like before the film's actually been made. So that would be the next step for the film at some point. Unfortunately, in order to get that done, we would need to raise the money to have the art done for the storyboards, which would probably be, I don't know, like $8,000 to $10,000 in order to make that happen. Which is not, it's a significant chunk of change, especially for for the way that the economy is looking. It's going to be hard to drum up. But I have not lost faith in it, and I hope that eventually I can find a way to sort of like make the animatic happen. And once that happens, if I can at least get to that stage, I think I'll be happy because then at least the film will exist in some form. Because the script is really, really wonderful. If anybody's interested in reading it, if you are on the Nova Motion Pictures development slate on our Trello board, it's there on the development slate. You can find the screenplay there. You can go read the screenplay. I encourage you to do so. It's a lot of fun. It's a really rollicking adventure story. All right, and we have gone an hour and a half into the stream. I think that is more than enough time I don't even know how many other people are watching right now. Let's find out. Oh, we got a few people watching. Nick's asking, did she ever land? Yes. Oh, you want to see the catch? Yeah, no, the catch happened. Yes, she did. She was caught. So yeah, it was it was a lot of fun working on this. Thanks everybody who did work on it. Thanks everybody who contributed to it. Put in a lot of hard work on this. Again, I really hope that something can be made of it in the future. Thank you all for coming and watching this little peek into madness. I do hope that we can get back at some point to doing the live seminars, because then we can talk more about film theory and use actual clips from actual real movies that got made. You want to see the trailer again? Yeah, absolutely. I'll go ahead and I'm going to run the trailer again. We'll do that to close this out. We'll go ahead and we're going to run the trailer one more time. And again, you can always see this if you go to Nova Motion Pictures YouTube channel. It's there along with all of our other wonderful films that we have put out so far. I encourage you to check out To Whom It May Concern, which was the film that we did in 2018, which was a pretty large production for us, and we had a lot of fun making. I think that's probably going to be the subject of the next seminar. Or you can watch Keys, which is a wonderful little short that we did last year, 2019. And The Sybil is also there, which is an earlier film that's got Darren in it as well. And you should go watch it because Darren's in it, and Darren gives an amazing performance in The Sybil. Thank you, Darren, again for being in that short. But okay, we'll go ahead and we'll close out with the Firebird trailer once again. Thank you all for coming.
I will tell you a story. It is an old tale of the old times, when the world was still wild and beautiful and strange, and the forests were still dark and fearful. It begins with a prince who was also a pauper, and a princess who was stolen on her wedding day, and a vile, decrepit sorcerer who could not be killed, and who had terrible monsters at his beck and call. But the prince could not defeat such darkness without the help of a very special creature. A spirit of fire who did not wish to be tamed. This is the legend of the Firebird.